If you're joining us, please like and subscribe. I'm kind of starstruck, actually, Abby. Just saying, bit starstruck. One of the great YouTubers of our time, as I live and breathe. Not just a YouTuber, not just a YouTuber. We'll
That's
talk about.
damning with faint praise.
No, what are you talking about? YouTube's the future now, whether we like it or not. Actually, dystopian as it may well be. No, I mean you're not just a YouTuber. You're an actor. You're so many things. We'll talk about it. I just want to start. I mean, let's just start. I mean, you must be like, oh, roll eyes. Do we really have to keep talking about this? But I find it interesting from one side of the LGBTQ rainbow, because coming out as a cisgendered, for those who don't know, that means not trans. My gender the gender assigned to me at birth is the gender which I feel comfortable in.
They got it right. They were right first time. They nailed it.
They nailed it.
Yeah.
Is exactly. I didn't have to quibble with that one. But coming out as gay was stressful. But I only had to come out at the time to my friends, my family. It was so stressful. Coming out as trans in the current climate to the world, that's a much bigger deal. So do you just want to talk me through that and the kind of build up to it and what what was your fears, what was going through your head?
Well, I had two comings out really, because I had my private coming out to my family and my friends, which happened a long, long time before I came out publicly. So that was very stressful and very, 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 very typical. It's kind of followed the typical model of a lot of trans people coming out privately, and then having to navigate various sort of legal and medical obstacles as well. And then much later, I had my coming out publicly, because for those who don't know me already, I'm an actress and I'm a YouTuber. My show is called PhilosophyTube, and it has about 900,000 subscribers at the moment. And I've been doing that for a few years. I teach philosophy in a fun way. And I started it when the government tripled tuition fees, because I just wanted to give away my philosophy degree. And it became this sort of huge thing. So I had this massive audience. And I knew that as soon as I came out, I would instantly become one of the most recognizable trans people in Britain. So I was under a lot of pressure, but I took my time with it, and I waited until I was ready, and until it was sort of undeniable. Really, I couldn't really hide it anymore. All my trans audience were like, "Yeah, we see you. You're not getting away with this. We clocked you ages ago." In fact, even my trans friends who knew me, even when I came out to them in private, I remember I told a friend of mine, I was like, "I think I'm trans," and she was like, "Yeah, I know. I've known for months and months and months." And I was like, "Thanks for telling me. That's really kind of you to clue me in on that one." So that was interesting. But yes, I suddenly been thrust into this position of incredible responsibility as a public trans person. And I've been on the BBC now. That interview should be coming out soon, and now I'm here on the Owen Jones show. I mean, you say that you're starstruck. I mean, I've been following your work since I was very small. So
okay, make me feel old. Thank you very much. That's the end of the interview.
Goodbye. Thanks very much for having me. So it did put me under a lot of pressure. And in a kind of very grim coincidence, I remember a few friends telling me, "Oh, well, you're not going to be the most recognizable binary trans woman in Britain, because there's always Sophie. Everyone knows Sophie, like very famous trans pop music producer." And then in a horrible twist of fate, the morning that I came out publicly, the news broke that Sophie had very tragically died. So that sort of threw me for a loop, and I considered, oh, should I delay my coming out? And in the end, I just had to go for it, really, because the time was right. But yes, it's been a very interesting journey. I spoke a little bit in my coming out statement about how I feel a lot of pressure to get it right, which I can't, because I can't be the kind of perfect paragon of trans Britain. But I'm trying to do my best and to handle the responsibility, whilst also avoiding becoming like public trans lady, because that's not who I am. It's not what I do. I'm just an actress. I want to be on stage and on screen and making my show on YouTube. So I'm trying to sort of balance this the metaphor that I've used is it's kind of like marrying into the royal family, in that to me I'm doing it for topical. I know. To me, I'm doing it for love, but to everyone else, it's this huge deal, and that also comes with a lot of negative attention as well. So, yes, it's been an interesting few months, and I think it's going to only get more interesting as I keep going.
I mean, how have you found the response? But also, it's something I've spoken about a lot on the show. I've interviewed people like Sean Fay, for example, a brilliant trans writer, Freddie McConnell, who did a brilliant documentary called Seahorse as a trans dad. Both friends of mine, both brilliant trans writers and campaigners, journalists, and talked a lot about I suppose, the burning skip of transphobia that the country we live in has become. I mean, it's rampant. And it's not just, in the US, transphobia is obviously a very big problem. It's more associated with the right, though. So even like mainstream Democrats will often be, or mainstream feminists, certainly trans inclusive, article of faith. That's not the case in this country. In this case, transphobia is raging across the spectrum, even though there are many progressives and leading prominent feminists who are very trans inclusive. So tell me about the reception, but also coming out in this atmosphere with a full-blown moral panic akin to the moral panic against gay and bisexual men in the 1980s and 1990s in the media, and why you think that's happening, and how that makes, do you think, you feel as a trans person and trans people generally?
Well, you've touched on a lot there.
Sorry, it's just a simple question.
Yeah, just a simple question. Well, in terms of the response, first of all, the response from my audience has been overwhelmingly positive, which has been lovely. For years, I have deliberately been cultivating a trans-inclusive atmosphere on my show, citing trans philosophers, giving trans perspectives on philosophical issues. Not always, but I've just made it very clear, hey, if you're not okay with this, then this is not the show for you. So, and I also have quite a large trans following, partly because I've been friends with other trans creators publicly, and partly because I think at least some trans people clocked me long ago and were like, okay, we know where this is going. They recognize the telltale signs. So the response from my audience has been overwhelmingly positive. The response from the kind of public media, it's a little early to tell. The LGBT media was very much on my side, which is lovely, as have a few sort of smaller media outlets here and there. So I think the Metro had a nice column, and some international American and Canadian, and I think German and Spanish news organizations gave nice little write-ups, or not always sort of, lavishing me with praise, but just sort of using the correct pronouns and using the right pictures and so on, reporting on this as if I'm a woman who is going through a big change and with a public following, and just kind of being very normal about it, which is lovely. The response from mainstream British media, it's a little early to tell. So when I did my interview with Ben Hunt from the BBC, he tweeted out a picture of us saying, hey, I just spoke to Abigail Thorn, and that put me on the radar of some sort of fairly large British TERFs, I think. And I think when that interview comes out, I'm expecting the backlash to step up another level. I'm still waiting for the other shoe to drop, particularly from British TERFs. In terms of British transphobia, yes, I mean, it's now, it's very obvious, I think. Well, no, actually, perhaps it's not, because I have a friend who works for the BBC, and I told him a few months ago, I was like, the British media has a reputation internationally for being notoriously transphobic. And he was like, really? I had no idea. Yeah, and I showed him some articles, and he said, well, they seem neutral to me. And I said, yes, they seem neutral to you because you're cis. They're not taking a neutral position on whether or not you deserve equal rights. So the British media is notoriously transphobic. However, the conversation I have found always centers around, oh, isn't the media very toxic, or isn't social media very toxic? And yes, that's true. However, I think it's important for us to realize that trans people in this country, like legally and politically, do not have equal rights. I can't get married the same way that you can. I can't adopt children or start a family the same way that you can. I don't have equal rights to healthcare the same way that cis people do. And really, it's those things that really need to be changed. I mean, if everyone in Britain woke up tomorrow and was suddenly just filled with love and positivity and happiness about trans people and absolutely supported us, we would still be living in a world in which I can't get married or start a family without permission from the government. And we would still be living in a world in which I have to use a segregated NHS and cut off from the rest of you and have to see a psychiatrist and go on waiting lists to get the exact same treatment that you can get much more easily. We would still be living in an incredibly backwards country. I mean, the result of Bell v. Tavistock has been a de facto ban on transition for trans kids, which is just unconscionable. It's been internationally condemned by doctors and lawyers and human rights groups, and I'm very happy that the decision is going to be appealed. But Alabama's new law that they passed the other day, banning healthcare for trans kids, has been internationally recognized and nationally recognized in the US as absolutely barbaric and unconscionable. But that brings Alabama into line with the law that Britain has had for years, and we have been that repressive for that long. So really, it's not just an improvement in the tone of the conversation. It's not just about politicians coming out and saying, yes, we must give the trans dignity. Like, I mean, how much dignity can I really live in if I don't have equal rights? You know, that's the change that needs to happen.
Before I ask about other stuff, because there is infinitely more to you than your recent coming out, to say the least. You're one of the most fascinating.
Thank you.
People in the YouTube and beyond universe. Yeah, I mean, there will be, and I know this, lots of younger trans people watching this who are actually quite scared at the moment. They're scared because of the atmosphere. They're scared because almost the entire media is ranged against them, not just the right-wing media, the whole shebang, because of prominent figures who constantly and almost obsessively, and I think anti-trans activism in Britain is a disturbing case study in online radicalization. People have clearly gone down online rabbit holes. People sometimes call Mumsnet Prosecco Stormfront, which is funny. But
I've never been on Mumsnet.
It is, yeah. I sometimes get piled on Twitter. I'm like, where's this coming from? Then I go, oh, there's a Mumsnet thread, and now I'm being subjected to lots of homophobia. Yeah, and I mean, in terms of there are a few allies as well who are willing to speak out. So, what would you say to not just young trans people? There are lots of people maybe who are older who haven't come out. What would you say to them about who are feeling maybe a bit despairing, a bit scared right now? What would you say?
I've been asked this question a lot, and I never really know how to answer it, because being any kind of trans in Britain is extremely difficult, and I was and am scared as well. And I think if you're not scared, you're not really paying attention. I mean, I'm sure it hasn't escaped your notice, Owen, that the things people say about us, they're the same things that they said about you only a few years ago.
Indeed.
So I think, you know, lesbians and gay people and bisexual people should rightly be concerned about this as well. Coming out as LGBT at all, never mind trans, in Britain right now, why? Of course you'd be scared. Of course you would. And I wish I had some words of consolation to offer. I'm also conscious of the fact that being white, being thin, having an education, having the privileges that allow me to be articulate, put me at a massive advantage. I mean, one of the things that I didn't realize until I came out was how much time I have to spend explaining things to cis people, and I don't mean in a conversational sense that you and I are having. I mean that, you know, having to sit down and explain to my own doctor what the NHS rules about caring for me are, or having to sit down and explain to a landlord, to an estate agent, to someone in a position of authority to say, no, actually, the rules that you have to stick to and that you should know are this. And I have had to go away and research that. So being able to, like, putting points into charisma, being able to explain and be articulate, being able to manage the emotions of, for instance, a male doctor who says, no, I can't do this for you. And I have to say, actually, you know, not only can you do this, you are required to do it, to manage their emotions, to help them along, as women do men all the time. It's a skill that we have to develop. But yes, being articulate and being able to explain oneself is a majorly useful thing. And I'm aware that's not just like a gift from God. That's not a talent. That's a result of privilege and whiteness and thinness. So I'm aware that I'm in a very lucky position, even as a trans person. So as hard as it is for me, it will be that much harder for many, if not most, other trans people. So I wish I had some words of consolation to offer. The one thing I would say, with all those caveats I've just mentioned in mind, is that the difference between being in the closet and coming out is night and day. I could never have imagined that I could be so happy and whole and content, and that even when things are scary, that I would say, well, all right, well, at least I'm all right in myself. That I might be at risk from the world, but I'm okay. But Abigail's all right in her, you know, that I'm no longer my own enemy. And I remember when I realized that it wasn't a question of, well, it wasn't a question of, am I trans or not? I realized I had crossed the threshold, and it's a question between either I transition or I stay in the closet. And I thought, well, one of those leads to me being dead within a few years, statistically. And the other one is coming out with all of the risks and all of the responsibilities, but ultimately with happiness and joy that I could never have imagined before. It's better than I could have even dreamed. So I suppose, with all the risks and all the dangers that have come with it, I personally have, so far, as I say, it's early days, found it to be overwhelmingly necessary and worth it.
It's really moving, actually. And I saw, I watched your incredible video coming out and the response to it, and just the impact it had on so many trans people, that they saw someone like you, who does have a huge following, coming out, and it made a lot of, I think, quite frightened people feel a lot better. And there was no pressure. I think there's sometimes this sense of, there's no, you talk about responsibility, but you don't have to have, there's no onus on you because you're trans, or other people because they're gay or whatever, to be fighters. Why should people have to have this extra kind of responsibility just because they want to live their lives normally? But it was a lifeline. It made a big impact on people, and we will.
I remember feeling that way when other trans people ahead of me came out. I remember when Elliot Page came out. I was like, God, yes, and it's an actor as well. Yes, and not only that, but an Oscar-nominated actor. I think I was like, oh God, yes, thank God, there's someone in my industry who has a big platform and has come out, and it made me feel so validated. And I know that Eddie Izzard has been out for a long time, but when she announced that she wanted to use she/her pronouns exclusively, again, that sort of filled me with light, and I was like, God, yes, finally. Even with all the backlash that she got, because I've followed her work again since I was very, very small, since before I even knew why I was following it. And I remember also in the more distant past, when trans people with platforms came out before I kind of realized that I was trans, I remember looking at them and feeling some kind of joy that I didn't yet feel entitled to claim or was unsure of. So I understand that a lot of people were very moved by it. It's wonderful that art and theatre, even YouTube theatre, can do that. I have received a lot of letters from trans people and partners of trans people, which have been wonderful.
I can imagine. And all LGBTQ people, we stand on the shoulders of giants, those who struggled before us. And we have giants like yourself, who others will stand on the shoulders of as well. But we will defeat our enemies with struggle. So let's talk about philosophy.
I'm 6'1". I sure as hell I'm giant. I stick out like a sore thumb.
I'm 5'9". Now people say I'm surprisingly tall, because I think people think I'm going to be like 2 foot.
Little weedy guy, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look at me.
I'm not wearing my heels today, so I'm not quite a glamazon.
You look very glam, very glam.
Thank you.
Philosophy, yeah. I studied philosophy A level. I'm not saying that but the reason I'm saying that is because at the time I remember being told that there was only like 200 philosophy A level students like in the country, and most sixth forms didn't even do philosophy. I find that really interesting, because you're obviously this viral success. Why do you think that is? Why do you think, other than, everyone who's watched your videos, they're incredibly produced, incredibly well presented. I mean, they're masterpieces of videos. Unlike those of us who just fling off videos. No, I mean, they really are just, there's creative genius going in. But why do you think philosophy is so marginalized in that sense? And why do you think you managed to tap into popularizing it? Why do you think there was such a receptive audience?
Well, when I started out, it didn't have anything like the production value or skill behind it. I had no experience. I was teaching myself to edit using iMovie and just filming it in my bedroom in Scotland. I'm not sure why philosophy itself has been so neglected, although I suppose part of it is people have this perception that philosophy is not relevant to their everyday lives, that it can't help them. And I think to a certain extent that is possibly not an undeserved reputation on the part of academic philosophy, which has long been sequestered, that has been slightly ivory tower, that has been the preserve of wealthy, white, cis people for a long time. And so I think the majority of people on Earth could fairly say, well, what use is this to me? I've got to go to work, So when I first started the show, I mean, my original plan was just to film my lectures and upload them for free on YouTube, because I thought I was in the last year to pay the old tuition fees before they were tripled. And I hate the idea of paying for education or getting in debt for education. I think it's, anti-human almost. So I think education should be free. And I decided to just put my lectures online, and the university said, well, no, you can't do that. And I said, well, all right, I'll just stand in front of a camera and say, this is what I learned today. This is what I got in my lectures, or this is what they told me at A-level. And now you've learned it for free. You didn't have to pay for it, but I'm Muggins and I did. And it grew very slowly. And I think I've been very lucky that it's grown very slowly. I mean, I started making the show 7 years ago, and only now is it knocking on the door of 900,000, 1 million subscribers. And I've been lucky that it has grown slowly, because I've had time to get used to each new level of public attention. I have friends who've become very famous overnight, and it can be very hard because there's suddenly things that you can't do anymore. But I've had time to get used to it, and I think there was an appetite to learn and to think critically about the world, and to not just accept what we're given, and to get a new perspective on things. And as the show progressed, I started trying to broaden the horizons. I remember deliberately starting to try and cite more women philosophers on the show, and more philosophers of color, and more trans philosophers, to go out of my way to try and correct the kind of bias that had been in my education. And I think people found that interesting. And then I started saying, well, what if they weren't just dry lectures? Because I'd done my professional acting training. So I thought, well, why not? Why wait around waiting to be cast in things when I could make the show a theatrical production? So I did. And now I think some people tune in for the entertainment, or for the fashion, or for the looks, or so in some occasions for my looks, which is always very flattering. But I think people do. I mean, the comments I always enjoy are when people say, oh, I never thought about it that way, or, oh, you've really made me think about this. And I also enjoy the comments when people say, oh, I just put your videos on in the background, but then I'm compelled to sit down and watch them because they grab me. Those are the comments I really like. But actually, you'll like this, Owen. The reason I started the show when I did was because I applied for an internship with Private Eye over the summer, and I didn't get it. I got a rejection email from Ian Hislop that, in hindsight, I wish I had kept.
You should have framed it.
I should have done. But I suddenly had a summer free where I thought I'd be going down to London and doing stuff with Ian, because I thought I wanted to do kind of what you do now, this sort of topical, newsy but like entertainment sort of thing. And I thought, well, Private Eye would be good, but I got rejected, and so I said, well, sod it, I'm going to start my own show, and I started my own show on YouTube, and now my audience is bigger than Private Eye's, which is a very good feeling.
Your face, Private Eye. Look what you could have had.
No, I like them. They're nice. They were nice to me. Nothing personal against Ian Hislop. I'm sure we'll cross paths someday, and you can buy me a drink.
It was
helpful. I should thank him, I suppose.
Yeah, I was going to say, inadvertently, that's helpful, but still, quite literally, their phenomenal loss. I mean, it's just a factual statement. You do have a bigger audience now than Private Eye. That's funny. That's inherently funny.
Mm.
I mean, acting.
It
Tell me
makes me
about.
feel good.
It should make you feel good. Tell me about acting. Tell me about, because this is something now you're, you know, this is. I mean, it's exciting. It's very exciting. So tell me about like your interest, where that came from in acting, and where that's taking you now.
I've been acting as long as I can remember. I remember my first roles in school plays when I must have been between 3 and 5. I've been doing it my whole life, and I knew when I was at school that I wanted to act professionally, and but it was expected that I would go to university first. So I did my philosophy degree, and alongside that, I was in as many shows as I could be. I actually auditioned for Star Wars Episode 7. I haven't heard back yet, but I'm beginning to think I didn't get it. They've still got my headshot, actually, so I should ask them for that back. So I finished my philosophy degree, and then I took a year out, and I remember sitting down because I didn't really know what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. So I went through everything that I did, and I said, how would I feel if somebody said I could never do this again? So if somebody said I could never study philosophy again, I'd be sad, but I'd kind of be okay with it. And I was doing a lot of stand-up comedy at the time. I thought, how would somebody feel if somebody told me I could never do stand-up again? And I thought, well, I'd be very happy, actually, because it makes me miserable and I'm not very good at it. And then I got to acting. I said, how would I feel if somebody told me I was never allowed to act again? And I realized I'd be devastated. And I thought, well, that's it. That's what I've got to do. I've got to do that. And I also applied the same test to my gender. It's a good one, that. So I went to professional acting school, and I had a lot of fun with life-changing drama school in London. And I've been a professional actor for the last few years, jobbing in this and that, a lot of voiceover stuff, some audiobooks. I've got some audiobooks coming up. I did the audiobook of Lindsay Ellis's debut novel, Axiom's End, last year, which was a lot of fun. I've had, so since coming out, it's been quite nice. I thought, oh God, it's going to be the end of my career. But actually, people are starting to write more roles for trans people now, and they're starting to realize that, it's good to get a trans person in that role. So I had an audition a while ago for a BBC comedy, which was nice. And I had an audition before that for a big Sky TV show that I can't talk about, but the character is amazing. It's a really, really cool trans woman in the show. So it's been, and I've got, offers of audiobooks and stuff. So it is actually, I think there is going to be a market and a growing market for it, and a growing appetite for it as well. I hope that my audience will come with me, if I were to put on a show in London, or if I were to, be in a series or something, I'm sure that at least some of my audience would tune in, which is nice. And I have also, I've written a play, which is about political radicalization and national decline and trans identity and how all those things are kind of mixed up. And I'm currently looking for a home for that play. I'm trying to find the right theatre to put it on. And then hopefully after COVID, we can start putting on a show that I've written.
Yeah, in a few months as well, which is very exciting. Could be June the 21st onwards. I mean, there'll be a lot of
fingers crossed. I mean, the theatre industry has suffered a lot because of COVID, and even before then wasn't doing great. But I probably shouldn't say who exactly has read it, but some people at some theatres that you would know in London have read it and said, "Oh, we like this. This is good." So
great.
We'll see. I probably can't say much more than that.
I mean, that is very exciting, by the way, and I will definitely myself be there amidst the summer of hedonism. I will mix hedonism with theatre this summer. Yeah, I mean, culture. The other culture, exactly, cultural pursuits. Hedonism is cultural pursuits. What I mean, another debate. I mean, it's a general thing about LGBTQ representation in the arts, and because Russell T Davies recently talked about cisgendered gay actors playing gay roles, because often, if we think about cisgendered gay people in TV and films, you do often get straight actors playing gay roles, and sometimes you kind of cynically think that's kind of their way of getting an award, maybe. They'll get validated, oh wow, you're
so brave.
I know, wow, because that's like emasculating. And then equally, lots of gay people in the acting world don't even come out because they think actually often with quite a good reason that coming out will mean they won't play leading roles, leading men, and which is rare. I mean, Zachary Quinto has, but it's very rare. And equally, obviously, in terms of trans roles, I mean, we have seen an increase in trans representation, but still got a long way to go. So where do you sit on all that in terms of LGBTQ representation in general, in terms of acting, and how much has trans representation in the last few years improved, and what are still do you still see as the big obstacles?
Well, I don't really have any hard and fast. I'm not going to deliver the commandments from on high. I understand that acting is a business, and producing entertainment is a business, and sometimes you might have a very promising performer for a lead role, but they don't have the star appeal or whatever. So I understand that it's not a simple moral choice, or at least rather moral reasons are not the only reasons that people consider when they're casting. Let's put it that way. I do think that, well, perhaps this is just me, just my sort of personal take on it, is if you have a cisgender man playing a trans woman, then people look at the poster and they say, oh, it's a man in a dress.
Yeah.
When people look at trans women and say it's a man in a dress, that's what gets us killed. So when I see a cis man playing a trans woman, I'm like, you should say no to that. That's just me. I don't think that should be done. I don't think it shouldn't be. It's illegal. Abigail Thorn wants, cancel culture. It's the end of free speech and acting. No, I think there are moral reasons why a cisgender male actor might like to consider turning down the part of a trans woman if asked. There's this interesting thing that I'm noticing at the moment where some casting departments are trying to be inclusive. So I will get a brief that says, oh, we would really love to cast a trans/non-binary person in this role. I'm like, well, like some non-binary people do call themselves trans, but why are you asking me? Because I'm not non-binary. So I'm saying, well, they say, oh, well, this role is either either a trans woman or they're non-binary. That's what I meant. And I said, well, which is it? Because if it's a non-binary role, then I think, really that should go to a non-binary actor. So some people kind of conflate it. Because I guess for some people it is a bit of a brave new world, and a lot of people are worried about saying the wrong thing, and that's the limit of their concern. And I think to a certain extent this harkens back to what we were saying about sort of representation and people thinking that as long as they consume the right media and include the right keywords and tweet the right things are fine. But again, no, even if we woke up tomorrow and there was, British media was full of positive, lovely trans representation that's all been kind of thoughtfully cast, and we're giving roles. I mean, I'll put a post-it note on that in my brain and come back to it. Even if we were to wake up tomorrow in that world, we would still be living in a world in which I can't get married or have children without permission from the government, and we would still be living in a world in which I don't have equal rights to healthcare. So to a certain extent, the debate about representation in media, I think, is fine, as long as that's not the be-all and end-all of the discussions that we are having. The thing I was about to come back to is that the other reason to cast trans people and LGBT people in the appropriate roles is that it's nice for us to get paid. A lot of us are skint and might not normally have those kind of opportunities. So there's kind of a good economic reason as well to cast the right people in the right roles. But as I say, I think it is more complicated than it is sometimes made out to be, and it does sometimes frustrate me when that's the only thing we talk about.
Yeah. Finally, final question. I'm going to ask you a very broad question, so just interpret it as you want. We've lived through a rocky period of human history. We've obviously had the pandemic. We've had years of Trump, the rise of the far right. We've got the whole existential threat of climate change, which is a bit of a downer on everything.
Oh yeah, that one. Yeah,
that old shebang.
The bees are all gone.
Bees are definitely in decline. Don't see many bees around these days. We've got not the most ideal of governments in Britain, to say the least, with a thumping big majority. What gives you cause for optimism amidst all that dystopian hellscape I just painted? In your kind of, if you were just generally to think, well, actually, it's not all a write off, and actually, humanity maybe does have a future worth fighting for. What is it that gives you that optimism?
Well, the real answer is that transitioning has given me a sense of optimism, because it's given me my life. I remember waking up years ago thinking, I can't face much more of this. I thought I'm probably going to be dead by the time I'm 30, 35 maybe. I might make it that long if I'm lucky. But after that, I thought I can't do any more of it. But now I wake up and I'm happy and I want to live and I'm determined to see it through. And my mental health, like I was saying earlier on, it's night and day. Like my life has blossomed in a way that, it doesn't redeem the nasty things that I have been through in the past, but it does bring them into a light where I can accept them. So that has given me a tremendous sense of optimism. The other thing that's given me a sense of optimism is there are people out there who are creative and who are talented and who are dedicated and who are starting to get it. And that I do see people change and change very quickly. So almost everybody, with the exception of people who, throw things at me or spit at me in the street and stuff, but almost everybody I've encountered in person since coming out has been wonderful, has been really, really lovely about it. So I remember when I moved flats ages ago, and I'd been on the phone to the estate agent, and they were helping me find a place. And I said, well, look, I'm trans, so, and at that time I didn't have the paperwork and the stuff that I do now. So I said, look, they asked to see my passport, because you have to show your passport to rent a flat in this country. Currently, that law has not been undone yet. But I said to them, look, the name on my passport is not the name that you know me by, because I'm trans. And I said, I know that they're not supposed to, but some landlords do discriminate against trans people. So I said, if you think we need to keep this a secret between us, then I'm okay with hiding. And the estate agent said, absolutely not, Abigail. We wouldn't ever work with someone who is like that. Don't worry. We will take care of you, and we will make sure that you get a nice place to live. We will do that job for you, and we're not going to treat you any different. And despite the fact that they, didn't have a policy in place, they weren't like 110% like up to date on the right vocab, and they weren't like fully woke or whatever. They were like, no, I'm still going to do my job for you. And I've seen people very rapidly come to terms with it. So a while ago, I was hiring a filming location, and I turned up, as myself. This was before I came out publicly, and I was telling the lady, I said, oh, well, if you happen to walk in when we are filming, you might see someone different, because my fans don't know that I'm trans yet. And she said, what's trans? And I'd been having a 15-minute conversation with this lady who had no idea that I was trans, had no idea what trans even is. And I said, well, I kind of explained, I said, well, I tried to do it without the jargon, but I gave her the sort of standard, well, it means that my gender is not the one that I was assigned at birth. Like, they got it wrong. They didn't get it bang on like they did with Owen Jones. And she said, oh, so, well, no, first of all, she said, oh, I just thought you were a woman. And I said, and then this look of panic came over her face as she realized she might have said something offensive. And she was like, I mean, and I said, it's fine. Like, I am a woman. Like, you're correct. It's fine. I am, she said, so you're going to become a man? And I said, no. I said, I was assigned male at birth. And like, she got it. And she was fascinated. She was like, really? That's amazing. Wow, I'm so happy for you. That's fantastic. I could see the moment where it clicked for her. And she said, oh my God, incredible. I'm so pleased for you. So I have seen people learn very rapidly. Even people who really, really get it wrong. So a while ago, I was chatting to a guy, and he used the T slur. He called me the word that you do not call trans people, which for those who don't know at home, it's the one with two N's and a Y. So he called me this, and I sort of sort of visibly shuddered. It was by coincidence the first time anyone had ever called me that. And he said, "Oh, I'm sorry, is that not?" And I was like, "No, that just for future reference, if you meet a trans person, you should never call us that. It's really, quite derogatory." And he was like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." And he sort of, again, he instantly got it. So I have seen, not just as a trans person, but also in my role as a public educator and in my role as an actress, that when confronted with the unfamiliar, people are very open to changing their perspective, much more so than I thought I would. I think that what entrenches people is when they have financial and career incentives to not change their mind or to keep their heads down. I mean, my friend at the BBC told me a while ago, he said, there are senior editors in journalist organizations who aren't willing to risk their career for trans rights. And I said, well, it must be nice to have a choice about that, because some of us have to risk our career for trans rights. But there are people who, when they don't have those structural incentives in place, are actually quite willing to change, and are willing to make what are really the most basic adjustments to give us the same respect and rights that you all have as well. So despite everything, I do still believe that most people mostly try to be mostly good.
That was a very good note of optimism to end with. Thank you so much, the criminally young and talented Abby, who has already been a trailblazer in so many multiple ways, and has an extremely exciting future, which I think many of us are very, very excited to see how it all pans out.
If I wasn't wearing 9 layers of concealer, you'd be able to see me blushing. No, I'm kidding. Thank you.
It's a big honor. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And I can't wait. Let's hang out when it's actually legal.
I'd love to.
Have a drink.
Come and see my play when it is on, if it's on.
I'll be there, all right. I'll be clawing my way to the front. Here's to that very bright future. Thank you so much, Abby.
Now, one of the things I bang on about is the crisis of democracy, and one of those institutions of democracy is having a healthy, robust, and broad media. We don't have that in United Kingdom at the moment, and one of the ways that you can ensure that we do have it is by going to Patreon and supporting Owen Jones' new TV news channel, which is an essential part of the news ecosystem, or could become an essential part of the eco news system in this country, to better inform us of the political issues and hot topics of the day. So sign up, join up, and donate generously.